We all know the story. The story of a girl forced into slavery by her stepmother and stepsisters has the chance to slip away and have a magical night that leads to when she finally is freed. Plus there's, pumpkins and magic shoes and stuff like that. But the story of Cinderella is one of the most famous stories of all times that a lot of young girls look to as a chance of that even if your life sucks sometimes, put on a bright face and just hoping for a brighter future can be a good thing sometimes. And there's a lot of versions of the story of Cinderella, but none does it worse than Ever After. And the sad thing is I want to like this movie and I feel bad that I hate this movie because I was introduced to this movie while I already knew about it. I had a coworker who loved this movie and she said, "Here, borrow it. You're gonna love this." I watched it and I hated it. And I felt so bad having to hand that DVD back to her. And when she asked me, what did I think of it? And I had to tell her the truth and say, I despised this. It's a really hard moment because how are you gonna explain to someone? Thank them for allowing you to borrow something while also having to explain how much you hated it. So with that being said, let's start out by just saying some few things that's actually good about this before I trash it to pieces. Starting with, the costumes are actually pretty good. I wouldn't say they're my favorite costumes. You have other movies that have, as I talked about last week, The Princess Bride. The costumes in that is just so bright and awesome. Well, this one's just dull. But for the most part, it's pretty accurate and it's not the worst costumes. If I was asked to be in a movie, I wouldn't say I would complain about being in costumes that look like this because they were not bad, even from watching. They were not bad, they were just not the best, but I would say that's still a positive is the costumes. The other thing is there is just some funny humor in it. Not all of it is funny. I think most of it that's supposed to be funny is not, but there was some funny chuckles in this movie. I also would just quickly bring up, in one way it is nice with Cinderella not needing someone to rescue her, but in the same way, as we're going to talk about, it's not done well, and it's, for the most part, destroys the movie when you have Cinderella acting the way she does. And with all that being said, let's jump into how terrible this movie is. Starting with, let's just go over, even though I already talked about this in the intro, what is the story of Cinderella? So that you understand why it's a problem what they did. So the story of Cinderella is plain and simple.
There lived a widowed gentleman and his little daughter Cinderella. Although he was a kind and devoted father, and gave his beloved child every luxury and comfort, still he felt she needed a mother's care, and so he married again. It was upon the untimely death of this good man, however, that the stepmother's true nature was revealed. Cold, cruel, and bitterly jealous of Cinderella's charm and beauty, she was grimly determined to forward the interests of her own two awkward daughters. Thus, as time went by, the chateau fell into disrepair, for the family fortunes were squandered upon the vain and selfish stepsisters, while Cinderella was abused, humiliated, and finally forced to become a servant in her own house.
Well, the three big things that stand out is the forced slavery, the ball, and the glass slipper. Those are the three elements that are really important to a Cinderella story. So in Ever After, how do they handle that? Well, they have it. So first of all, she's easily able to just walk out of the house whenever she wants. So she's not really, you see her do the chores somewhat, but it's not this, you don't feel the same way about that in like the Disney version of Cinderella or in the original story or anything like that, where it's a feeling of she's trapped in this house doing all the chores. And this, she's able to walk around town, do whatever she wants, practically. And you see her do some chores, but I remember finishing this movie the first time I watched it and being like, honestly, the stepmom and step-siblings were bad, but they weren't that bad. Like in the same way, like in the way of, I'm not sure if I am fully rooting for her in this movie because they weren't the worst people in my mind. They were not great, but it didn't feel as like she was trapped as in other versions. So that's the first problem they do. Second problem, the ball. So in the original story, the ball is a big point. The big moment where she meets the prince, where she finally has a moment of like enjoying herself. That's taken away from her. In this version, well, first of all, she meets the prince before, and some versions have it so she meets the prince before and it's okay. And then the ball is the moment where they have a breakup. The big moment of where she's finally having a moment of fear, where she's not a slave. She can just be herself with the prince. That is the moment where there was this lie revealed, moment, and he's like, I don't like you, and he walks away, and she runs off. But there is the whole slipper thing. But then it turns into less of the Cinderella story at the end, and more of a sappy chick flick ending. You know, the classic run through the airport, like, I actually loved you, I'm so sorry. It's like, no, that's not the story of Cinderella. That's not how it's supposed to be. Which is the whole point of the third part they destroyed, the slipper. Instead of the slipper being this great thing of her finally trying on the slipper, it's like, oh my goodness, you are the one and all that. Instead, he finds her, he's like, oh, here's your shoe back. He's like, oh, thanks, and put it back on, and boom. Check mark, you checked off that you have the glass slipper in it. That's literally all they did with that moment. They were like, you know the story of Cinderella? How much can we trash this story? Okay, yeah. And ever after, boom. I hate how much I hate this movie. It destroyed everything about Cinderella, and I've run into so many people saying this is their favorite Cinderella story. Why? This is trash. Kind of makes me feel depressed knowing that people think this is so great. The point of Cinderella, and while the Disney remakes are not that great, I think one of the greatest Disney remakes was Cinderella, and one of the greatest moments, in my mind, I could even say all of cinema, one of the greatest moments, or not the greatest moment, but one of the moments I was like, yeah, this really touched me, was the moment when the live action Cinderella, they make it so she suddenly realizes that she's been deceived and that she has been pulled into being the servant. And in one moment, in one way, I could have a whole argument against that thing and saying like, well, somehow, how is she that dumb that she hadn't figured out that before? But in the same way, I thought it was really well done with that moment of just being like, yeah, sometimes people like that stepmother in that version would slowly be like, well, we can't afford the help anymore. You would be willing to help out, right? It's like, yeah, I'll be willing, because she's a very kind person. Cinderella's a kind person. So I liked that point, and I thought that was a good point in the remake of making it so suddenly she has this moment where she realized, oh shoot, my stepmother did not have the best intentions in that whole thing, and she was literally just grooming me into being a servant for them. Versus in this one, Cinderella literally punches one of her stepsisters, and in one way, the call was justified, but in the other way, that's not Cinderella. This version of Cinderella felt like they were wanting to go for Belle more. Like, I'm okay with the idea of Cinderella being intelligent, but also I think Cinderella is not the person you need to voice. It's not the person to be like most, oh my goodness, look how intelligent she is, because she spent the whole, make it so she's a smart person who never got the chance to fully learn how she doesn't get the chance to read books. She doesn't get the chance to do any of that type of stuff because she's always working. You need to be able to see this Cinderella as Cinderella was a person who was mistreated for years and years of her life, so that at the end of the story, when she meets her love, her Prince Charming, it's a moment of she's free, not because somehow freed the slave type way, but in the way of the prince comes in and he's able to remove her from this toxic life she has to live in. She can't just leave. And the moment you make it so she can just wander around wherever she wants, it makes it so thus the ending can't be the happy ending of Cinderella. And this movie doesn't try to be that. That's a good point. It's not trying to be the end of Cinderella. It just checks off some Cinderella boxes to be Cinderella. Overall, this movie is boring. It destroys the story of Cinderella. The ball, one of the most magical moments of all of fairy tales, and especially of Cinderella, is completely destroyed. I could go on forever. Eventually I might put out a full review video where I break down the whole movie and talk about how bad it is. But this is a shorter review, and this is the video I'm putting out at the end of February, the season of love. And I wanted to end with one of those movies that ever since I wanted to start this channel, I wanted to talk about this movie in the way of just, everyone thinks it's so great. I can't see it. And most of all, I hate how much it gets people to think somehow they're watching this great Cinderella story where it really destroys everything about Cinderella. And it's a very bland, boring movie. So guys, if you guys like this movie, fine, you guys like it. But please, why are you guys saying it's the greatest Cinderella story? If you guys like it, but it's not a good Cinderella story. And most of all, if you guys don't like it, welcome to the club. If you guys don't know why you don't like it, well, I hope this video helped you figure out maybe some reasons why you might not like this movie. And if you guys haven't seen it yet, I guess you guys can check it out. I'll leave a link for the movie in the description, but I would not recommend watching it. You can watch other versions of Cinderella. It's just 10 times better, less boring, and you can have an enjoyable time. But with this movie, it's hard to see how you could have an enjoyable time watching it. Thank you guys for watching. This has been the Movie Night Reviewer. Peter Wary, signing off.